Most artists think proportions are all about placement, but that's exactly why their portraits keep coming out wonky. After drawing thousands of portraits for over 25 years, I've learned that accurate proportions comes down to 3 simple relationships, and they've completely changed the way that my students draw. So in this video, I'm going to show you what they are, how they work, and how just missing just one can throw your whole portrait off. The easiest way to understand how these relationships work is with a tripod. Each leg represents a relationship, and the reason most artists struggle with proportions is because at least one of those relationships isn't working with the others. So the camera tilts and your photo ends up wonky. And portraits work in the exact same way, except when they're wonky, they're extra wonky. So why is it so easy to throw one or even two of these legs out of balance? Well, there's one common mistake that almost every artist makes, and that's why eyes get drawn as pointed ovals instead of this, and mouths get that Cupid's bow shape at the top instead of this. Our brains don't just see, they interpret and replace what they're looking at with ideas and symbols. Most artists draw what they think they see rather than what they actually see. So how do you actually stop this from happening? Well, let me show you. The easiest way to stop these pre-existing ideas is to simplify everything into basic shapes. Because when you strip away the identity of what you're drawing, your brain literally can't jump to the symbols that it already knows. Now, you might be thinking, well, how do you even know what shapes to look for? To make this first hurdle much easier, I've created a free portrait tool that tells you exactly what shapes to aim for with just one click of a button. And if you combine that with these 3 techniques that I'm about to show you, this is what starts balancing those relationships. To prove this, before I started using these techniques, I was creating drawings like this. And you might be thinking, that's actually not that bad. This took me 3 days. Now compare that to my last drawing that took me 3 days, it doesn't even compare. And this drawing, it took me 3 hours. So then, what changed? Well, I used to try and perfect one feature at a time before moving forwards. The problem was, every time I shaded a new area, I'd find something else that didn't line up. So I'd fix it, move to the next area, find another mistake, and I just kept repeating that cycle over and over again. It wasn't until I started using connection points that my drawings became not only more accurate, but so much faster. Connection points are simply your vertical, horizontal, and diagonal alignments, and are incredibly powerful because all you're doing is finding what edge connects to another edge. Vertical lines are the easiest because even the small misalignment stands out. The moment something doesn't line up, you either eyeball it or draw a faint line and you see it instantly. Same with horizontal lines. Diagonal lines can be a little harder to judge on their own, so instead look for matching parallel angles, as it's much easier to compare 2 angles together than one by itself. This drawing works so well because instead of finishing one feature at a time and not having any alignments to connect to, I got everything on the paper first, so now I have connection points everywhere. This means I can make sure all the alignments are working and make corrections before committing to better shading. And as a result, I wasn't constantly correcting mistakes that were already locked in. A great way to start practicing this is to draw 3 to 5 lines that feel most obvious to you on your reference. It helps you start seeing those connection points naturally. Now, this alone doesn't solve the proportion problem, but it does bring one of those legs into balance. So now let me show you how to secure the next leg. This was something I completely overlooked, and because of that, the whole portrait would slowly drift. Sometimes it would end up too high and have to squeeze it back down. Other times the bottom would be too low and I have to try and push it back up. The crazy part is, I could have prevented all of this from happening by just focusing on one thing. I never established my biggest distances first, the widest points, the top of the head, the bottom of the chin. Adding these first initial marks stop that drifting from happening because they help you get the overall shape of the portrait much earlier. The easiest place to start is with the halfway points or matching distances. If we take the shadow line by his eye, you can see it sits in the middle. That immediately splits the portrait into 2 halves. You can then repeat that process in smaller areas. Now, it's important to remember that these distances are unique to each portrait. Just because a matching distance works on this portrait doesn't mean it will work on the next one. Your job is to simply find the patterns, and when you're working on a full body, it works in the exact same way. You'll often use the head as your measuring unit to see how many times it can fit into the body, But honestly, you can use almost anything. I genuinely like to keep things simple, so for this drawing, I used the rectangle to measure the width of the body. So next time you start a portrait, look for those biggest matching distances first and then build inside them, because the more you find, the less you have to guess. Okay, so now we've got two legs of the tripod working together. Let's balance the last one so your portrait looks like this instead of looking like it's had a few too many drinks. Have you ever done a drawing and no matter what you try, the forehead is too big or the nose is too long, or you're drawing more than one portrait and the first one looks okay and the second one just doesn't match? And then you either have to start again or do some serious surgery on the portrait. It wasn't until I stopped treating the portrait like this and I started viewing it like this that everything stopped becoming distorted. By working from big to small to establish the overall size first, this creates a container so nothing starts to drift. A great way to find the container is by looking at the negative space. This can actually be easier because instead of guessing how wide or tall the portrait is, you can literally use the paper to tell you. Once you've established the overall shape, you can then start breaking it down into the medium shapes, then break those into even smaller shapes. This helps your structure because it stops the inconsistencies from snowballing. Now here's where I used to get caught up. I thought once I'd drawn the container, everything had to fit inside of it no matter what. So I'd end up forcing these smaller shapes even if it looked weird. Here's the key. The container is your first reference point, acting as a guide. It's not a prison. As you work into the medium and smaller shapes, you'll naturally want to adjust the container so everything lines up. That's exactly what I did for this drawing. I got the biggest shapes first, which gave me the framework, and then used the medium and smaller shapes to adjust the overall size until everything worked together. So next time you start a portrait, don't worry about making the container perfect straight away. Refine it with everything else. And if you can get all three of these relationships working together, your tripod is balanced and you've got the foundations for an accurate portrait. But here's the issue. Even if you had perfect proportions, you can still have a flat and lifeless portrait. So watch this video here to learn how to make every portrait look alive by just fixing this one mistake.